Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 15, Text 20. So Nirpandra Rahita Purushotam Menna Sakhya Prayana Zuharda Hardayana Sunya Advane Urukrama Parigraham Angarakshan Gopayar Asadber Avaleva Vinyarjeto Asme. O Emperor, I myself have been bereft because of the Supreme Lord, my friend, my dearmost, my well-wisher, by the heart and soul that is vacant recently, because I was protecting the bodies of the wives of the all-powerful and the cowherds, and I was defeated like a weak woman by the infidels. And sometimes it's not one's fault per se that one is defeated, and sometimes the wives of a prophet are sent one, or whatever you want to call an avatar, are such vessels of examples and teachings that they are spoken of in such a sanctified way. Text 21. Tadvaedanus taeshava saratho hayaste so aham rathi nirpateyo yata annamante sarvam kshananatad abud asari saraktam basman hutam kuhaka radam evoptam ushyam. I certainly have the same bow and arrows, the same chariot, the same horses as Arjuna, the chariot fighter, for all the kings who offered their respects. All of them did so at a moment's notice, and that's how we should be if we actually believe that something's right. We should, do it right away, or do the preparations to do that at a better time or something like that, but not delay it, as in, you drop things, and, all those became useless because of the controller being void with the ashes of the offering and the butter and the money created by spiritual feats like that seed in a barren land. So it's important to remember that the power of things resides in that divine permission. La ilaha illallah, as it's said. Text 22 and 23. Rajams Tvayanu Prashtanam Suhardam Na Suhartapur Viprasapa Vimudanam Nignatam Mushtibir Mitah Varunim Madiram Pitva Madun Mateta Chatasam Ajanatam Evanyonyam Chatu Panchavasasheta. O King, because of your inquiry of friends and relatives of ours in the city. The spiritual have cursed, and the befooled of the killed with the bunches of sticks among themselves. They had fermented rice that they turned into wine, and having drunk that, they became intoxicated. And of that mental situation, there was the lack of recognition of one another, and all except for, well, 4 or 5 of them are all that remains. You know, so very often in ancient times and in modern times, people using drugs, you know, that has affected the outcomes of the battles. And by outcomes, I mean, you know, they generally lost. Text 24 didn't win as strongly or something, or lost on an individual level. Prayana etad Bhagavata Isvarasya Vichestetam Metho Nignante Bhutane Bhavayante Chayan Methah. It's almost because of the personality of a god. The supreme controller is whose will things are by. Sometimes there's killing between the living beings, and sometimes there's protecting of one another. Text 25. Jalaukasam jale yadvan mahanto adante andiyasa durbalan baleno rajan mahanto baleno mithah evam balishtair yadubir mahadbir etaran vibuh yadun yadubir anyonyam bubaran sanjaharaha. Of the aquatics in the water, it is that the larger one swallows the smaller ones, the weak over the strong. O king, the strongest are over the less strong in a duel. Thus, by the strongest, well, sometimes it's the overall strength per se, you know, the endurance that can really play in. By the descendants of Yadu, one who has greater strength, the common ones, the supreme of the Yadus, by the Yadus among one another, is the burden of the world, and that has been unloaded in the past. Just like if you get in a fight with someone bigger, the point is to survive long enough for them to be worn out and for you to let go. But if you can strike, well, you know, self-defense, that's, I'm not, you know, saying anything about anything else. But yeah. And sometimes there's a chosen people or tribe, but they're chosen in terms of there's teaching they're supposed to be practicing and passing on and manifesting, whatever you want to call it. And there's duties like, you know, the protection of other individuals. Text 27. Desa kalartha yuktane hart tapupasamane cha harante smaratas chetam govinda behitaneme. the space and time are impregnated with importance by the heart that burns, extinguishing and attracting, by the remembrance of the mind, the personality of pleasure is spoken about unto me. And people relate this to the Upanishads, the Puranas, the Sutras, the Shlokas, the Vedas, the Brahmanas, various other texts, you could say. And I would qualify things by reminding that, you know, it's the pure scripture, not necessarily what's included in tradition, that I would call towards. And if we refer back to the Bhagavad Gita that we went over some weeks ago, knowledge, you know, you got the Supreme Lord, and so that's mentioned in this verse. We have the living being, you know, mentioned in this verse as well. We have time and space, and processes of activity. So those are considered to be the most important types of knowledge. Text 28. Sutta uvacha evam chintayato jishno krishna pada saro ruham sauhardana tegadana santasid vimala mateh. Sutta said, for this reason, while thinking of instruction about the Supreme Personality, the feet of the God of Light, resembling lotuses, you know, the impact of God leaving behind the flowers, by deep friendship and great intimacy is pacified. It so became without any tinge of material contamination for the mind. So the mind is not limited by this just merely thought of material creation. And we have that talk about the fairy rings of the mushrooms and stuff in some cultures, and this is the same thing, but it's taking it straight to divinity and saying divinity leaves behind this and the flowers are left behind. Because mushrooms don't always smell nice and stuff like this, so talking about flowers is more likely to elicit positive associations. Text 29. Vasudevangre anudyana pare brahmeta ramhasa bhaktya nirmathetas asha kashaya vishanu Arjuna. Lotus feet of the agent of light. The constant remembrance of this is expanded with great velocity, and devotion that was subsided by the, subsided the sense of the unlimited by the dint of the conception. Arjuna. Okay, so it's talking to Arjuna and how Arjuna ever remembered And because he ever remembered, these impurities didn't come in. Like, there's an implication in that one passage of the Quran that the devil has no power over anybody that's actually in remembrance of God. If their remembrance is pure, their deeds are pure in that moment, and therefore they can't be serving anything else. But when they're not serving God, even if it's whatever, then some power can start to have. And that doesn't mean that certain individuals can't, situations that they control upon others, that, but the power in that sense is over the enemies that are attacking, or, that have set forth these situations, right? Text 30. Gitam Bhagavata Jnanam Yatat Sangrama Murdane Kala Karma Tamo Ruddham Punaradhyagamat Prabhu. Instructed by the Divine Personality regarding transcendental knowledge, so, revelation, that which is for being in the midst of battle, the time and the actions, being in the dark mode, revive them again through the Lord of his senses. And that's the thing, is it's not about what you do or you don't do, it's what you should do, and it's how you should regard things in the situation. And it does matter what you do and don't do, but there's categories of life that you don't usually engage in, and it becomes right with that remembrance, with that principle. Text 31. Vesoko Brahma Sampatya Sanchenna Dvayata Samsaya Lina Prakrete Nair Gunyad Alingatvad Asambhava. Free from bereavement by the possession of the spiritual assets, being completely cut off from the doubts of relativity, merged in the material nature due to being in transcendent, because of being devoid of a material body is free from birth and death. So when all you are is spiritual, what you're operating doesn't limit you by such clinging that you say, well, yes, you're operating a human, but you're no longer just human, if you know what I mean. Text 32. Nesamya Bhagavan Margam Samsatam Yadu Kurasya Cha Savapathaya Matem Chakre Nimbrtatma Yudeshdera. Deliberating, having a discussion or discourse regarding the Divine Personality and his ways. There was an understanding of the end of the Yadu dynasty, and also the abode of the Lord. On the way of desire, they gave attention, and because he was lonely and alone, Yudhishthira decided to go. And the implication is he decided to go back to Godhead. And again, you can do this in life and sort of you remain, but, you want to bring this towards your moment of death, right? Text 33. Partape anusrutya dhananjayo detam nasam yadunam bhagavan gatim chatam akanta bhaktya bhagavate adokshaje nivesitatmo Pararama Samsrta. Kunti also overheard Arjuna speaking of the end of the Yadu dynasty, the personality of God disappearing, and also all those unalloyed in devotion unto the Supreme Lord. Who is transcendental. With full attention, he became released from material existence. Text 34. Ya yaharad bhuvo baram tam tanum vidyahavaja Kantakam kantakaneva dvayam chapesetu samam. That by which they took away of the world its burden. That body relinquished the unborn thorn by the thorn, and like that, both of these also were equally controlled. And by the unborn, of course, by the permission of divinity, and divinity, despite all this talk of manifestation and knowing the presence and stuff, is unborn. We incarnate because we have to. Text 35. Yatha matsyade rupane date jahyad yatha nata bubara kshapeto yena jahu tacha karevaram. As much as the embodiment of fish and forms that are ever accepted apparently has to be relinquished, exactly like a magician from the burden of the world is relieved by which they let go, and that also of the body. Now, one of the things in magic, you could say, the consciousness control, is that when you do a spiritual operation, that you let go of the results. You try to do things the best you can, just, leave it. Leave it for divinity to reward you. Leave the material positive and negative effects to take place and move on with your life. Text 36. Yada mukundo bhagavan imamahim jahu savatan va sravanya sarkatah tada hareva prate buddha chetasam abhadra hetu Kalir anvavartata. When? I don't remember what Mukunda did. When there was a leaving by the personality of God, of this earth, with the self-same body, hearing about him is worthwhile. At that time, from the very day of those whose minds are not sufficiently developed, It's a cause of ill fortune. And there's the full manifestation of Kali. So depending on your consciousness of the situation, like it says in Al-Quran Surah 3, in the first mention of Muhammad by name, it's 140, right? 140. It delivers people from that fanaticism, because you stay on the path regardless of if the messenger is alive. But some people are going to go, time for that religion is over with, or that sort of thing. It's like, religion isn't just because of one individual, their life before or after. No, it's something that goes, the Satanana Dharma, or whatever other phrase you're going to use for that. It's something that goes before and after all these things. Text 37. Yudhishtheras tat parisarpanam Buddha purecha rashtre chagrahe tathatmane vibhavya lubanrata jehma himsanade adharma chakram. Gamaneya paryadat. Yudhishthira thoroughly experienced that expansion in the capital, also in the state, and his home, and also in person, in creating avarice, untruth, diplomacy, violence and envy, irreligion. It was a vicious cycle for departure, and he dressed himself accordingly. It's not so much what's going on, it's about how it's going on in you. Text 38. Svarat pautram vinayanam atmana susamam gunay toyanivyah patim bhumer abhyashanchad gajavaya. The emperor properly trained his grandson as his own self, and equal in all respects by the qualities, outskirted by the seas, as the master of the land, enthroned him in the capital. And Hastinapura, it was that capital. In this day and age, we don't do that. Even Shia narrations relate that don't just accept someone's conclusion or authority, whatever, because of their ancestry or who they knew. And certainly there's not that nepotism that people get positions just because they're in the family line. Now, you can train them through spiritual discipleship and that sort of stuff, and other sorts of training. But dynasties of kingship, it's not supposed to be that time. Although in a way it kind of is, because instead of chivalry, we have politicians and celebrities. And it's the same ruling families, that there's always someone from them that's the richest in the world, right? And even the presidents descend from that, but they're not, in my country, there's, except for Donald Trump, everybody's been descended from at least one of two English kings. So in a way, we do have kingship, but we have different types of government that serves that more than it does the people. But anyways, it matters more what principles, and in this case, we're talking about principles that, were lived up to. Text 39. Mathurayam tata vajram surasenapatim tatah prajapatyam nirupyashtem agnin apibat Isvarah at Mathura. Vajra was also. He was the king of the Surasenas. And thereafter, the Prajapatyam sacrifice was performed with the goal that the fire was placed inwardly with a capability, and that capability was supposed to enable him to go beyond household life. Text 40. Visrajya tatra tat sarvam dukula valayadikam nirmamo nirahankara sanchenasasha bandhana. Relinquishing those and everything his belt, his bangles didn't interest him, and he was unattached and totally cut off, and there wasn't supposed to be a limit to his detachment, from the material things for the material things, right? Text 41. Vacham juhava manase tat pranayetare chatam murtyavapanam sodasargam tam panchat vehe ajohavit. Having relinquished speech into the mind into breathing, other senses into that, death, breathing, with all dedication into the body of the five elements, and certainly it was amalgamated. Text 42. Tritve-hudvacha panchadvam tach chaekadve juhon vune sarvam atmane ajuhavid brahmane atmanam avyaya. Under the three qualities, having also offered to the five elements that in one's nescience is amalgamated, the thoughtful sum total of the soul is fixed into the spirit, the field of consciousness, into the inexhaustible. So we have these different words for soul in various traditions, and body and mind and all that. But ultimately, there's a living being, and this living being is, there's this consciousness beyond that. Text 40. And it's your real identity. So you no longer identify with these vehicles. Text 43. Chiravasa niraharo bandavan Muktam Murlaja Darsayan Atmano Rupam Jadunmata Tesachavat Anavekshamanu Nirangad Asranvan Badero Yatha, accepting torn clothing, giving up solid food, not talking, with untied hair. He began to show in his bodily features the inertness, like an urchin, without waiting for a situation, without hearing, just like the deaf. Text 44. Udichim pravivasasam gata purvam mahat mabeh harde brahma param vyayan navarteta yato gata. The northern side was where those who wanted to enter there had the path of their forefathers, and those who were greater minded within the heart regarding the Creator, the transcendent, was what they were constantly thinking of. And that's how they passed the day, wherever they went. Text 45. Sarvatamanu nirjagmur ratara karta nischaya kalinadharma mitranandrashba sabrashta prajabhuve. All his younger brothers were left at home by him, and they followed the elder brothers deliberately by the age of Kali in the principle of irreligion, by the friend observing that was overtaken by all the citizens on earth. Okay, so they observed that there was the dark age coming and decided they need to just step away from the decline. And certainly so-called civilization hasn't really made things better, has it? Text 46. Tasadu karta sarvartha jnadvat yantikam atmana manasa darayamasur vaekunta charanambujam. All of them having performed everything worthily. Those things which are all worthy, and they know that well. With regard of the ultimate of the living within the mind, and they sustain that concept of the Lord of the spiritual sky, lotus feet. Text 47 and 48. Tadyanud riktaya bhaktya visuddha dishana pare tasmin narayana pare ekanta matayo gatim avapur duravapam te asadbir vishayat ma bih viduta kalmasha satlanam virajanatmana irahe. That positive meditation was freeing because of the devotional attitude and purified by intelligence and transcendence. In that, the personality, lotus feet, and those is what those who are fixed in the Supreme have as a destination, and to attain it is difficult to obtain by them or by the materialist absorbed in the material needs, and they wash off the material contaminations in their abode without the material passion by the self-same body. And it's difficult even when you know what you're supposed to do, right? But you can't reach the immaterial by just, trying to identify with the material, and that's it. Because you even miss some of the material when you have this concept that it's only what I personally perceive or figure out, right? And text 49. Vedura te parityajya prabhase deham atmana krishna vesena tatcheta petarbe svakshayam yayau. Vidura, who's the uncle of Yudhishthira, also quit the body in a place of pilgrimage. And his body was absorbed, thinking about the all-attractive. And thus were his thoughts and actions, along with the residents of Pitraloka. He went to his own throne. And so we shouldn't delay pilgrimage till we're old and figure we're going to die on it. But some countries make you wait till you're old. And some people wait till they're old, whatever. I think as soon as you can afford to do a pilgrimage that you think is necessary, you should go do it. Or you think it's good for you, Now, you do take care of yourself in life, so it can take decades to afford a pilgrimage, especially nowadays with them narrowing it down and putting you in 5-star motels and not letting you go in the way that you used to. If you can carry around your tent or a bag or something like this, and wrap yourself up at the side of the, on the hill with 10,000 other people, but they kind of don't want you to do that now, right? Text 50. Draupadi chatarajnaya patinam anapekshatam vasudeva bhagavate ekantamatirapattam. Draupadi, who was the wife of some of the Pandavas, and at that time she also knew very well about the husbands that didn't care for her, like the representative of the light beings, like the personality of God. did, exactly. So with total concentration, brought him. So she had the same result, because she was in line with what was going on. And text 51, Yah Sradhayaetad Bhagavat Preyanam Pando Sutanam Ete Sampreyanam Srunote Alam Svastyayanam Pavitram Lamva Harau Bhaktim Upayate Siddhim. Anyone who has devotion to this, all of these are very dear to the personality of God. Pandu had sons who departed for the ultimate goal, hearing only about the good fortune of being perfectly pure. They obtained, under the potency by that devotional service, and they gained a sort of perfection. And I might as well close with the Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.